As quilters, despite the amount of fabric we may have on hand, we're always short of just that one extra piece we need. Well, I'm going to challenge you today, and I'm going to challenge you next time you have a shortage, dig through your pile and see what you can find. I've done that on so many quilts and have been so excited with the results. I'm Leah Louise from Inspired Quilting by Leah Louise, and there was a time I lived for 15 years without a quilt store, without a Walmart, without any kind of shopping facility at all, except for online. And I had to figure out how to quilt with what I had. And that was the beginning of a whole new quilting journey for me. And I want you to check out the backing of this quilt. I love it. It's the quarter log cabin. You can see the corner up there peeking out. But what I did is not unlike the jelly roll race. I used a bunch of 5-inch strips of yardage that I had collected, and they're all in tones of greens with other colors mixed in, and I think it worked out beautifully. Making a backing should be as much fun as the front, and make it interesting. And we can use just squares and create a big checkerboard effect, and I've done that too. Or long wide strips, that works out great as well. But try something different. I think you're going to love this. Watch and see. Oh, and don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, please do so and give me a thumbs up. It's great having you here today. I'm anxious to share this with you. Many of you remember this, the quarter log cabin that I did maybe 2 months ago, and I'm getting ready to finish it. I need to do a backing and come up with a binding. So because this, I have a pile of fabric under here, because this is done with purples and greens and blues as the lattice, I'm going to use that in the backing, and that was my plan, but I didn't have enough of any fabric to do it. And I had quite a bit of different fabrics that would work, and I thought, what would be the best way? And one of the ways I've done it in the past is just using blocks, big color blocks throughout the back. And then I thought, the jelly roll race, remember that? But I don't want to use 2.5-inch strips, so I cut a bunch of 5-inch strips. Now this obviously isn't in my blue and green realm, but look at it, it has the greens and it has the blues and purples, it has some gold to make it kind of interesting. And so I pulled out, now this is stash fabric, that's what makes this wonderful. This is yardage that I've purchased over the years. Most of these are probably easily a decade or so older. I love the trees. We went to Breckenridge, 15 years ago, and I picked this one up, and I absolutely love it. And so I wanted to use all these together, and I started cutting 5-inch strips. Now, you can use any size. I chose 5 because whatever I have left over, I can easily then cross-cut, and I have plenty of extra charms. And that works for me because 5-inch squares are very handy. So I started cutting. Most of these are 42 wide. There were a couple pieces that were cut to the longer length, along the length of the fabric versus the width of fabric. And so I just went with whatever I had and I started cutting. And I cut about 3 to 4 pieces of each fabric, and I stacked them in different piles. And my idea is I'll just start with one and I'll sew these together, and then I'll come over here and I'll do these together, and then I'm going to join these all up. So I started, and I want to show you where I am with it before I start piecing the back, because I just think this is going to be a great idea. And so here's my first group. These are 5-inch apiece, so they're going to finish at 4.5, so each section will be 18 inches. And I'm going to probably need about 4 of these. The quilt is, I think it's about 60 inches, and I don't know if I'm going to put a little narrow lattice strip around the outer edge or not. I haven't decided, which will obviously affect the size. But here's one strip, and you can see I run it through just like the jelly roll race. And basically what I did is I rather than sew them all together and cross them over, I sewed them all together into one long strip, and then I cut them to my length. And so I think it's somewhere around 65, 66 inches. And so I cut the first one at that length, and I sewed the next one, I cut it off. And so when I get to the bottom, I just cut off wherever I was finished. So I have this is going to end up probably being in the outer margin. You know, when we do our basting, we add those few extra inches. So this probably won't get picked up, but I wanted to make sure I had that fabric there in order to do the quilting. And then this one, you know, this I had an extra piece, so I let that one. So I wasn't so worried about the bottom end, but I did want to keep the top end relatively even. So where's that top? Right here. So I tried to start everything kind of in the same general area. So when I cut a straight line, I'm going to have a good even top. So what'll happen is I have this 4 here, and then I'll lay that to the side over here. And then I'll bring in the next one, and I'm going to sew these together. And so this is going to be how the back of the fabric looks or the back of the quilt looks with all these different fabrics. And you see there's some purpley blues and light greens, dark greens, a bit of that gold yellow there that we also have in with the trees. So, you know, our mountainous pine trees here, and then of course this purple, but there's lots of greens in here that really carry out the green color with a little bit of that turquoise that kind of brightens it up a bit. And you can see in the trees there's some of that turquoise blue. So it all really does tie together, and I like having some of these darker greens because that's going to add the background, so to speak. So we have contrast. We have some of our brighter greens here, we have the darker ones, and then we have some color, which is our accent. So this will be great for the back of a quilt, but as I'm putting it together, I thought, wow, what a great and easy way to make a quilt top as well. If you just want to do a quick quilt top using up a lot of fabrics in the same color family and just mix them and put them together, they go together really fast this way. So I'm anxious to finish this off and show you what the backing is going to look like. I think it's going to be fantastic. And then I have a plan for quilting this as well, which I'm going to share with you, because I'm really excited about doing the machine quilting. It's not free motion. We'll be using a walking foot, and you've seen a walking foot before. They're a very handy device, and they work great in doing machine quilting when you're doing either straight lines or long curved lines, which is what I'm going to do. And of course we have the feed dogs underneath, which is what makes this walk. It brings that top fabric in the same the speed as the bottom fabric, so that way when you get to the end of your quilt, you don't end up with more on top than you do on the bottom, and you've got it hanging over, and you know all those issues that we have. And of course this is the guide that goes with it. If you haven't seen how this works, I have 2 guides for this, and I have a right and a left, so I can put it on either side. And as I'm sewing, if I want to space myself with a particular distance between my stitching, then this is what I use. I just line this up and I stitch along, and there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and get this back put together and get the quilt basted. Once I'm with that, then I'll start the quilting, and then I'll come back and we'll do the trimming. These corners still need to be trimmed, and I don't want to do anything until I have the quilting finished, because I just want to make sure I don't cut anything short. I want to leave plenty of fabric around the edges, and I just need to decide what the final quilt's going to look like. I'm just not quite there yet. So there we are. Oh, and I have some binding. I have to show you this because I'm really excited. I have some binding fabric. Of course, you saw the purple here. I have more of this, and then I have it in the blue. And I think these will be a great binding, especially next to the greens. I just think it's going to be a lot of fun. So this quilt is going to look awesome. I can't wait to get it finished, and I'm going to show you as soon as I get there. So first, let me get these steps finished, and once I get the quilt bound and ready to go, actually I'll spray baste it because that's just the easiest way for me to go. And then we'll do the quilting together, and I'll show you how this is going to finish out. It's going to be lots of fun. I have an idea for a quilt plan, and I want to show you what I'm thinking before I do it on the machine, because it's going to be hard to visualize as I go. And this is also going to help me to mark the first line. So we're going to do a diagonal quilt, quilting line, quilting pattern with the walking foot. Not unlike the last one we did. We did a long meandering line from corner to corner. This is going to be a larger curve and more like one long S. And I think it's going to be really interesting, and I kind of like the idea of having this kind of come off center. Now you can certainly do something in the middle like this, but I want to work off center. So if these are my center points, my quilt is approximately, I think it's 60 by 61, but I'm going on the premise that it's a square at 60 inches. And the quilting will just adjust accordingly. And what I want to do is kind of start my lines in this kind of mid area. I don't want to start right at the corner. I want to start here because I'm going to have a curve. Let me see how I'm going to do this. And I don't want it too long of a curve or too sharp. Okay, so I think, so this is where I want my curve to be. And so I'm going to start my line right here. And I'm going to come in, do just a little bit of a curve, and I want it to cross the middle point about right there, where that dot is. And so that's about a quarter of the way. And then I'm going to bring this down and kind of do the same thing here and come this way. Now, I don't want too deep of a curve. This might be a little too much. I may want to take it more like, let me get a marker here. We can see. I may want to do something more like this. So we come there and we come here. And the reason being is if we have these deep curves, then as we do the quilting pattern, the curve is going to get deeper and deeper, and you're going to end up with some U's that you're quilting instead of elongated quilting lines. And actually, I think I want this to kind of come this way. All right, so we're going to kind of do this like that. Okay, so there's my first line. And I'm going to run this about every 2.5 or 3 inches. I'll do a quilting line. But along in the middle, probably right through here, I'm going to bring it in closer, maybe to like 1.5 inches. And so I'll come in with a wide, and I'm following this line right here. I just happen to have a blue marker too, so let me put blue on top of there so you can see what we're doing. Yeah, that's a good curve. So what's important is that it's a long curve and it goes across the middle. And that's only important because that's what I'm doing. You can do this any way you want. It's incredibly, flexible. It's whatever your personal taste is. But let me show you what I want to do here. So I'm going to start with a wide separation between my quilting of, like I said, about 2.5 inches. And then I'm slowly just going to work my way in. Now I will mark probably with a pin here and here. so that I know as I get to that point, I want to go in a little closer and then come back out. And so on the next row, I'd leave that pin there for a couple rows and move it as I need to. So this will be a bit wider. Then I'm going to come in here and come in a bit narrow and then widen it out. And so just kind of do that. That's kind of a fun way to do the quilting. And kind of come in. And what I'm kind of playing with here too is changing the narrow. As we come, maybe we kind of bring that narrow in a line this way. But that gets a bit fussy. We have to, really put some thought and plan into that. Okay, there's one side. So let's go ahead and perfect it this way. I think I'm just going to take it straight and easy. I'm not going to do anything fancy. I'll come in between the pins and then I'll come out. And I'm going to do the same thing again. I'll come in between the pins and then I'll come out. And I'll come in between the pins and then I'll come out. And you can see I'm kind of keeping it in the same general shape. And as I come out, I can widen this because I'm kind of liking that instead of being too close. And then we just kind of come in and, finish our quilting that way. So that's kind of what the plan is. So I'm going to get this initial line in and then I'll start quilting. And this is going to be incredibly forgiving because we don't have any specific pattern per se that it needs to look like a thing. It's just going to be some wavy lines, and it's going to sort of evenly be laid out where the outer edges are wider and then it meanders across the quilt. Then we come down into the corners just like we did the other one. But instead of doing this kind of a line like we did, we're just going to take a long straight line like this. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So let me get my quilt pinned and marked, and we'll get to the sewing machine and we'll get started on this. I'm ready to start quilting, and I have a pin just marked there so I could find it easily, as well as my line. And the back of the quilt, as you may recall, is greens and blues and purples. I wanted to use a variegated green thread on the back, but I only had just a little bit. So I'm going to use this purple and blue, which I think will be kind of, and it's a dark navy blue and a dark purple with a bit of lighter purple in there. But I think that's going to work really good. That's going to be my bobbin for the underside of the quilt. And then on top, let me pull my thread out. I've got a blue with a bit of lavender variegated thread. And so that I think should be quite pretty. And I want the quilting to stand out, so that's why I'm using some bolder colors. And I have this marked. I'll show you as we go along. So the quilt has been spray basted. It's ready to go. And I have my presser foot on, or my walking foot. And I have the guide in. When I get into those narrow spots, actually I'm going to set this now because I want to be at about 1.5 inches apart on the stitching. There we go. Right there's about 1.5 inches. And then when I come up here, this will probably be, I think I'm going to go 3 inches on this. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get the first line in. And I came 12 inches down from the top along the side to do my first stitching line. And I'm just going to put this right here. Oh, I need to lengthen my stitch. So instead of the 2.5, I'll go to a 3.0, make it just a little bit longer. And I'm just going to slowly quilt my way through here and follow the lines. And it's a gentle curve, so it's very easy to follow. And you can see,
in the darker places, the line is hard to pick out, but on the lighter fabrics it works well. Now, if that's the case, you can always use a chalk pencil, a white chalk pencil. You can find that probably in the Quilt Notions area as well as some art areas, in the store, depending on the store you are. And so we're going to come join up here and just move along. Take it nice and slow, because once I get the first line in, then there's no more markings, and I'm going to be sewing from the center out to the corners, which is what we did on that last one, and that just makes it so much easier. And I had a lot of positive feedback on that, so that's why I thought it would be fun to do this quilt in a similar way. All right, now we should be coming. Oh, okay, this one disappeared. I can just barely see right there. And let me see where it's going to come on the other side here. It goes this way, right here. Okay, so it's going to come down this way, and I'm going to sew to here. And there's my line there. Okay, wow, that disappeared fast. All right, so I'm going to continue following my line. And we'll go. Now this pin that I'm coming up to, this is marking kind of the center area. What I did is, this pin is my center of the quilt, and then this is about 10 inches, maybe 11. It's less than 12, so that I know on my next rounds of quilting, if I'm going to go in and narrow in, it'd be in that area along that center area. Okay, so we're going to go right here. And I think what I'm going to do is, I want to keep the pin there, but I'm just going to move it over here so it's not going to get in my way. All right, because I'll be sewing over on this side. All right, and now we're going to start turning. And and you don't really even see the turn, the curve as you're making it, because it's such an elongated curve. So it makes it quite easy to maneuver. Okay, so we're going to come in here, and I'm going to leave that center pin in. I'm not sure if I'll need it, but I think it could be handy if I do, to have it there. I always think, oh, I'll remember, it's just right off the yellow strip, and it's like, no, that won't happen. Okay, so now we're going to start curving in the other direction. And I think, can you see those lines? Let me grab my pen. So it's right along here that I'm going. And like I said, all you need is that initial line, and then the rest we're just going to follow with our walking foot. All right, kind of maneuver things. Get this out of the way. So we're past the midway point, and I just want to keep my quilt so the line that I'm sewing is relatively straight to the needle, because if I try and I have it angled too far this way, then I'm going to be pulling the quilt to try and follow that line. And you can get tucks and you can stretch it and your line can get all wonky. So you just want to adjust your quilt as you're going so that it's the line you're sewing on is relatively straight in front of you. I'll get rid of these threads and see, we're just going to kind of come around through here to this line. So like I said, if you need a continuous line initially, which may be helpful if you've not done this before, get a white chalk pencil, or just get some blackboard chalk and just put it on there, because it comes right out. As long as there's no oil in there, that's where you run into trouble. Anything with oil is going to stain the fabric. Okay, now I'm going to cut this, and then I'm going to go all the way back to the other side, and this is where we'll start doing our quilting. Oh, I got a little jag right there, but I'm okay with that. We're going to have a few spots, I'm sure. All right, so I'm going to come out, and I'm going to use a ruler initially just to kind of, get me on track. So I want to start at about 3 inches, which is right there. And I'm going to, you know what, I just may use my gauge. I think it'll go out 3 inches. Well, it goes 2 3/4. Okay. So tell you what, I'm going to change this, and I'm going to go to that 2 3/4 because I'd rather have the gauge. So whatever that distance is what I'm going to go with. Now I have my line drawing here, so this is where I am. So I've put the initial line in, so I'm going to come this way. So this is going to stay wide till that first pin, and then I'll start going in a little bit, maybe even a little before. So I want to gauge myself and see. That's a good distance away, so I'm going to stay at my gauge right here. And I'm just going to follow this line along. And then as we start to curve, I think I'm going to take this in just a little bit. And if you watch the marker, the gauge over here, you can see how it's a very slow change. I don't want to make an abrupt curve to turn this. So I'm just going to come in just a little bit, and we'll just kind of keep coming. And I've got my ironing board right next to me. I have it set so it's level with my table, so I can put the excess quilt over there, and that'll let it kind of lift some of the weight. Okay, so we're getting close. So I'm going to start bringing myself in, and we said we want to do 1.5, which is right here. So I'm going to line 1.5 up with the needle, and I'm going to put my gauge right there. And I'm just going to slowly work my way around until I get to that point, so that I'm at 1.5 when I get to about where the pin is. And I'm going to work my way along this curve here. And you can see a little bit, what I'm doing is I'm rolling this excess so it stays inside here, and I'm using my hand to hold this together, but then I'm using my finger and thumb to help guide the fabric on this side. So this pin is our center point. So we're going through the middle, and we're just going to follow this line, and you see how the gauge just follows that line. Here's our next point. So we have about, 8 or 9 inches. So we'll get up to there. said, I want to keep my quilt sewing line straight in line with my needle. I don't want to have to try and work it over at an angle. So, all right, this is the end of my line. So now I'm going to start bringing it out to 3 inches. So if I come here and oh no, it was like 2 3/4, I think. Actually, I can just press it with my finger because it was as far as it would go. Okay, so I'm just going to slowly bring myself back out to that edge. And just kind of take it a little bit at a time. You don't want to bring it in too close, too fast, because then you lose your curve and you get kind of this straight, flat line instead of a nice long curve. There we go. And we'll just follow that right around. And row 2 is taken care of. I finished off that line of quilting, and I'm going to come back up and I'll just put my gauge to the spot at the edge of the quilt that it's closest to. So instead of starting all the way up here, I'm just going to come down where I'll be starting on the edge of the fabric. And I run off the edge a bit, there we go, and pick up the quilt. And now I'm just going to sew, making sure nothing's getting caught underneath. And you see what's nice about this is the fabric doesn't build up over here. Initially you have a bit that you have to wrestle with. You saw in the beginning I rolled it up and just worked with it from there. But every row that you go eliminates, you know, a bit of that cluster in there, so it's a lot easier to work with. And that's why I like doing the diagonal quilting, because I get the center done and then I just work to the edges. Alright, so here we are at our first pin. So this is where I'm going to reduce down to 1.5 inches. So I'll put my needle right at 1.5 inches and bring my gauge in. Whoops, get my glove caught. And I'm just going to work on getting a nice smooth curve. And just slowly come around. Okay. Kind of straighten everything out so I don't have too much to pull, because I want to be able to come around this curve smoothly. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to hold this hand here and use this hand to kind of twirl it a bit, just like I'm pivoting. If you've ever sewn a circle or drawn a pencil line with a compass, a pencil circle with a compass where you hold it in the center and the pencil goes around the outer edge. That's a little bit of what we're doing here. Got some threads. I always try and cut as I go. Sometimes they pull out, other times they've gotten caught in the stitching and they're going to stay there. All right, I still have a bit more. My needle or my pin is down here a ways, so I'm going to keep my 1.5 inch. And we have a curve coming, and our pin is right here. So I'm going to get into my curve here, and then I'll branch out. So I'm just going to follow. And this was kind of a sharp curve there. I'm going to kind of elongate it a little bit and smooth it out and kind of go to the inside. And then meet back up on the other side. Okay. Now, I'm going to bump that out to our full width, to our almost 3 inches. And I want to make sure nothing's twisted, nothing's wrapped underneath. It's a little jumbled over there, but I think we're going to be okay. So let me just roll this up. And I'm just going to slowly work my way to bring this over. And see there, I got a little abrupt in making my curve. So I'm just going to let this one follow. And just come right around. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up on this side. I've just got a couple more rounds to do here. We pretty much just have a semicircle, which is great, because that's very easy to quilt. And maybe one or two more rows and we'll be good. Let's see, we've got that one. Oh, that's right. This is. I thought I ran out of batting, but here's my line. It's actually inside the batting. A moment of panic there, thinking, what did I do? All right, then we'll take this last one here. This is probably going to all be cut off, but I'd rather get it quilted now. And there you go. I think I can show you a little bit of the back. You know, everything looks really well, and you know, the spaced lines work good. I like that spacing, and it just kind of fills up the back of the quilt nicely. And like I said, because it's a log cabin and these are all straight strips, I like the idea of having a curve in there because it breaks up that angular look. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this around and get started on the other side, and we'll see how that side goes.
And how is that for a quilt backing? Oh my goodness, I love it. It's such fun. I've never done anything with this many colors before, and I like the strip effect. And you can see how the quilting kind of goes diagonally across, and that works in front on the quilt as well as the back. I'll show you that here in just a moment. But I just wanted you to see all these pretty colors. I think they're wonderful. I love it. And here's the front. And this is where I did my initial swirl line from here to here, and you can see how it curves down into the corner, and it kind of does the same thing up here. We get a little more of an S in this spot, but I really like it. I think it worked well, and I think that quilting looks really nice against all those log cabins. I'm happy with the success of this quilt. It's been fun sharing it with you. I hope you enjoyed watching and have some new ideas about doing your own quilt backs. I want to thank you for being here today. I appreciate you following along. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and give me a thumbs up. I'd certainly appreciate it. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.